Millionaire didn't know he had children until he saw the triplets at his wife's grave 20 years after kicking her out. Before we start this exciting story, tell me in the comments, which part of the world are you watching from? And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, take advantage now, click the subscribe button and activate the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our incredible stories. Now then, let's get to the story. Wesley Thornton's eyes snapped open at precisely 6:15 a.m., just as they had every morning for the past 30 years. The soft morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors. He lay still for a moment, listening to the emptiness of the vast space around him. 58 years old today. The thought settled heavily in his chest. The bedroom alone was bigger than most apartments, decorated in shades of gray and chrome that somehow made the space feel colder. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything except warmth. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, right on schedule. Linda, his assistant of 15 years, had sent his itinerary for the day. Board meetings at 9 and 11, lunch with potential investors at 1, press appearances for the new property development at 3. Private dinner reservation at Elysium at 7. Wesley's finger hovered over the screen. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the thought of another perfectly orchestrated day made him feel hollow inside. Without really thinking about it, he typed, "Cancel everything." Her response was immediate. "Mr. Thornton, is everything all right?" He didn't answer. The morning stretched before him, unfamiliar in its emptiness. Wesley wandered through his home like a ghost, touching surfaces he usually rushed past. In the kitchen, the marble countertops gleamed untouched. He couldn't remember the last time he'd actually cooked something here. His feet carried him to a part of the penthouse he rarely visited, a small room off the main hallway that served as storage. The door creaked when he opened it, probably for the first time in years. Cardboard boxes and old furniture filled the space, all covered in a thick layer of dust. In the corner stood an old wooden cabinet, its dark surface dulled with age. Wesley's hands trembled slightly as he pulled open the drawer. Inside, beneath, a stack of old papers, lay a leather-bound photo album. He didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but his fingers moved of their own accord. The pages fell open, and a loose photograph slipped out, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. Charlotte. She was standing in their first garden, the one at the little house they'd bought when they were young and full of dreams. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, her smile radiant with joy and possibility. The sun caught in her dark hair, making it shine like polished mahogany. The image burned in his vision. He could almost smell the lavender she'd planted along the fence, hear her laugh as she teased him about his serious expressions. Wesley's throat tightened. He closed the album with shaking hands and fled the room. But Charlotte's smile followed him, haunting his thoughts like a gentle accusation. Without conscious decision, he found himself in his car, driving through the city streets. The familiar route to the cemetery where his mother was buried provided no comfort today. The grass was freshly cut, the air heavy with the scent of recent rain. His mother's headstone stood as it always had, elegant and understated. Wesley stood before it, feeling the weight of unspoken words and missed opportunities pressing down on his shoulders. A flash of color caught his eye, fresh flowers on a nearby grave. Something pulled him toward it, a magnetic force he couldn't explain. His feet moved slowly across the damp grass, each step feeling heavier than the last. The name on the headstone struck him like a physical blow. Charlotte Elizabeth Thornton, beloved mother and teacher. Light guides even in darkness. Cameron showed she had died just 3 months ago. 3 months while he had been closing deals and building empires, Charlotte had taken her last breath. Wesley's knees weakened. The world tilted sideways, reality shifting beneath his feet. His hand reached out to steady himself against the cool stone. The sound of footsteps on grass barely registered. When he looked up, 3 young men stood before him, their presence both foreign and achingly familiar. They knelt by the grave, placing fresh wildflowers beside the ones already there. The first young man's face was set in hard lines, his jaw clenched tight with an anger Wesley recognized all too well. The second's expression was different, analytical, cautious, as if calculating every possible outcome of this encounter. The third boy's features showed a sensitivity that seemed to carry the emotional weight for all three. They rose slowly, their eyes meeting his. In their faces, Wesley saw echoes of Charlotte, the shape of their eyes, the curve of their cheeks. But he saw himself too, in ways that made his heart stutter in his chest. Without a word, the angry young man reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. The paper was slightly worn, as if it had been carried for some time, waiting for this moment. He held it out, his hand steady but his eyes cold. "You're Wesley Thornton," he said. Not a question, but an accusation. Wesley nodded, unable to find his voice. "Ethan," the second young man said quietly, a warning in his tone. "We agreed." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The third brother's eyes, softer than the others, studied Wesley's face with an intensity that felt like being read from within. Wesley took the envelope, his fingers numb. Before he could speak, before he could find words to bridge the chasm of years between them, the young men turned and walked away. The one called Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking back with what might have been regret beneath the anger, then followed his brothers. Their footsteps faded into the cemetery silence, leaving Wesley alone with the weight of the envelope in his hands and the truth carved in stone before him. He stared at his name written across the envelope in familiar handwriting, delicate curves and precise lines he hadn't seen in 20 years, Charlotte's handwriting. Wesley stumbled back to his car, the envelope shaking in his grip like a living thing. The cemetery's wrought iron gates loomed behind him, but he couldn't bring himself to drive away. Not yet. Not with these unread words burning a hole in his hands. He slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against his back. For a long moment he just stared at his name written across the envelope in Charlotte's handwriting, delicate curves and precise lines he hadn't seen in 20 years. The seal broke with a soft tear. Inside were several folded pages, rustling, as he pulled them out, along with what looked like official documents. His hands trembled so badly he had to rest them against the steering wheel before he could begin reading. "Dear Wesley," the letter began, the words steady unlike his racing heart. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and our boys have finally found you. Yes, our boys, Ethan, Noah, and Camden. But we'll get to that truth in a moment." Wesley's throat tightened. He forced himself to keep reading. "I need to tell you about the day I left. Not the story you believe, but what really happened. I never betrayed you, Wesley. My family background and the debts you discovered weren't hidden from you out of deception, but out of shame and fear of losing you. When you found out about my modest upbringing and the loans I'd taken to help my sister's medical treatments, the disgust in your eyes broke something in me. You said a woman from my background would never fit into your world, that my presence would damage everything you'd built." The words blurred before his eyes. Wesley blinked hard, remembering his own face that day, the cold fury, the swift rejection, the way he'd called security to escort her out. "I could have fought, could have tried to prove my worth to you. But your mind was made up. Your empire, your reputation, your social standing. These were the things you valued above all else. Above me, so I made a choice." A car door slammed somewhere in the parking lot. Wesley barely heard it, lost in Charlotte's words. What I didn't know then, what I found out just weeks later, was that I was carrying triplets. Your sons, Wesley. Our beautiful boys. His hands clenched the paper so tightly it crinkled. With trembling fingers he smoothed out the official documents that had been enclosed with the letter. Birth certificates. 3 names jumped out at him, printed in stark black ink. Ethan James Thornton, Noah William Thornton, Camden Alexander Thornton. Father, Wesley Richard Thornton. The names hit him like physical blows. Those young men at the grave. Their faces flashed in his mind. The angry set of the first one's jaw, the calculating caution of the second, the quiet intensity of the third. Ethan, Noah, and Camden, his sons. I named them Ethan, Noah, and Camden. The letter continued. Ethan after your grandfather, whose strength you always admired. Noah after my father, who taught me perseverance. And Camden after the street where we first met, when you were just starting out and dreams seemed possible for both of us. They've grown into extraordinary young men, Wesley. Different as can be, but each special in his own way. Ethan has your determination and fire. Noah has your analytical mind and steady focus. Camden has your hidden sensitivity, the part of yourself you rarely showed the world. Traffic hummed distantly on the main road. A bird called somewhere nearby. The world kept turning while Wesley's reality crumbled around him. I never told them to hate you. Never painted you as a monster. When they asked about their father, I told them the truth as I knew it. That you were a good man who valued certain things above others. That sometimes pride and fear can blind us to what matters. Most I built something too, Wesley. Not towers of glass and steel, but a place where children could learn and grow regardless of their background or their parents' bank accounts. The Beacon of Hope School started in my living room with 5 neighborhood children. It grew into something that will outlast us both. Wesley's vision blurred with tears he hadn't realized were falling. I've had 20 years to come to peace with what happened. 20 years to understand that we were both victims of our own fears and expectations. I forgave you long ago, Wesley. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. The boys know everything. Now, I told them before the cancer got too bad. They deserve to understand why I made the choices I did. What happens next is up to them. And to you. Remember what we used to say? Light guides even in darkness. Maybe now in the quiet after I'm gone, that light can finally guide you home. With love and hope, Charlotte. Wesley sat in his car for a long time, the letter heavy in his lap. Then something snapped inside him. He jammed the key into the ignition and sped toward his penthouse, running red lights, barely seeing the road through his tears. 20 years of missed birthdays. 20 years of first steps, scraped knees, school plays, graduations. 20 years of their lives, gone in a heartbeat, because he had been too proud, too rigid, too fearful of what others might think of his wife's humble origins. The whiskey glass dangled from his fingers as the full magnitude of what he had lost, what he had thrown away, settled over him like a shroud. His perfect empire of emptiness suddenly revealed for what it truly was. Outside his window, the city lights blinked on one by one as dusk fell, each one a reminder of all the moments with his sons that had slipped away, never to return. The morning sun cast long shadows across Wesley's bedroom, but he hadn't slept. His usual 5 a.m. workout and protein shake were forgotten. The letter lay on his nightstand, creased from being read countless times through the night. He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. His fingers paused over one name, Detective Sarah Chen. She owed him a favor from a corporate investigation years ago. Sarah, it's Wesley Thornton. His voice was rough from lack of sleep. I need information about my past, about Charlotte. While waiting for Sarah's call back, Wesley searched his own records. In his home office, he yanked open filing cabinets, pulling out boxes of old documents. 20 years of carefully organized records scattered across the floor as he searched frantically. There it was, a folder marked Personal 2005. Inside were the bank statements that had enraged him, showing loans and debts he'd considered evidence of Charlotte's deception. Now, reading more carefully, he saw what he'd missed. Every withdrawal, every loan had been made for medical treatments at Riverside Hospital. His phone rang. Sarah's voice was professional but warm. Wesley, I found something. Charlotte's sister, Rebecca, was diagnosed with leukemia in 2004. Insurance denied coverage for experimental treatment. The loans were all for medical bills. Wesley closed his eyes, shame washing over him. Charlotte hadn't been hiding a secret life. She'd been trying to save her sister. Sarah continued, There's more. Charlotte tried to contact you multiple times after leaving. Letters, calls to your office. They were all blocked or returned. Whom? Wesley demanded, though he already suspected. Your executive assistant at the time, Margaret Winters. She followed your instructions to keep that gold digger away. Her words, from her notes. Wesley remembered giving that order in a moment of wounded pride, never imagining Charlotte would be carrying his children. His own words had built the wall between him and his sons. He thanked Sarah and hung up, then dialed another number, his old family doctor. Dr. Miller, did you know Charlotte was pregnant when she left? The long pause on the line was answer enough. She came to me 8 weeks after your separation, Wesley. I told her I'd need to inform you, but she begged me not to, said you'd made it clear you wanted nothing to do with her. Doctor-patient confidentiality. I couldn't break that. 3 babies, Wesley whispered. She carried and raised 3 boys alone. She was remarkable, Dr. Miller said softly. I helped deliver them, you know. She refused pain medication, worried it might affect the babies. 16 hours of labor. Never complained once. After hanging up, Wesley sat in his chair, staring at nothing. The enormity of Charlotte's strength contrasted with his own weakness, left him breathless with shame. On his desk sat the model of Thornton Tower, his crowning achievement. 58 floors of luxury apartments and offices worth billions. He'd been so proud of building something that would last. Yet Charlotte, with nothing but determination and love, had built something far more valuable. 3 lives that carried forward the best of both of them, and a school that nurtured countless other children. Wesley stood suddenly, grabbed his keys, and left the office. He needed to see this school, this true legacy Charlotte had created while he'd been stacking glass and steel toward an empty sky. Following the address he'd found in Charlotte's online obituary, Wesley drove to the outskirts of the city, where high-rises gave way to modest neighborhoods. His luxury car looked out of place as he parked across from a converted Victorian house with a hand-painted sign, Beacon of Hope Community School. The building was nothing like the sleek educational institutions he funded at charity galas. This place showed signs of limited resources but unlimited care. The gardens were meticulously maintained. Colorful murals brightened exterior walls, and children's artwork decorated every window. Wesley sat in his car, watching. Children of all backgrounds played in the yard while teachers moved among them with attentive smiles. Through an open window, he heard music, someone playing piano while young voices sang along. Gathering his courage, Wesley crossed the street and approached the entrance. A bulletin board displayed photos of community events, student achievements, and in the center, a portrait of Charlotte surrounded by flowers and notes. In loving memory of our founder, read the caption beneath her smiling face. Can I help you? An elderly woman with kind eyes approached. I'm just visiting, Wesley said, unable to tear his eyes from Charlotte's photograph. Are you interested in enrolling a child? Or perhaps volunteering? We always need help. I knew Charlotte, he said, quietly. The woman's expression changed, a mixture of surprise and caution. I'm Margaret Wilson, the current director. I worked with Charlotte for 15 years. 15 years, Wesley repeated, the time frame hitting him hard. She built all this? Margaret nodded slowly. Started with 5 children in her living room. By the time we moved here, we had 30 students. Now we've got nearly 100 plus adult education classes in the evenings. She studied him carefully. You're him, aren't you? Wesley Thornton? Wesley nodded, unable to speak. She never spoke ill of you, you know. Not once in all those years. Margaret's tone wasn't accusatory, simply stating a fact. Even when she was working 3 jobs to keep this place running and raise those boys, Wesley felt the weight of every word. The boys, they work here too? Camden teaches music 4 days a week. Noah handles our legal matters. Ethan built most of our furniture and runs our vocational program. She gestured to a hallway lined with photographs. That's Charlotte's office at the end. It's become something of a memorial. You can look if you'd like, but please don't disturb anything. The boys still come there sometimes when they need to. Feel close to her. Wesley walked slowly down the hall, taking in photos of children's graduations, community events, and construction projects. In many, he could spot his sons at different ages, working alongside their mother, growing up within these walls. Charlotte's office was small but filled with personality. Bookshelves overflowed with teaching materials and children's literature. Her desk held framed photos of the triplets at various ages. Plants thrived on the windowsill. On the wall hung a simple framed quote, "We build our legacy in lives touched, not fortunes amassed." Wesley sank into a chair, overwhelmed. While he'd been constructing towers and closing deals, Charlotte had been here, creating something of true value with nothing but determination and love. For the first time since reading her letter, Wesley wept openly, mourning the woman he'd rejected and the 20 years with his sons that could never be reclaimed. Wesley returned to his penthouse that evening, but it no longer felt like home. The space that once represented his success now echoed with emptiness. He spent the night researching the Beacon of Hope, reading newspaper articles about Charlotte's work and watching video clips of school events where he could glimpse his sons. By morning, he'd made a decision. A week later, Wesley sat nervously at a corner table in a modest cafe 2 blocks from the school. He'd requested this meeting through Margaret, who had reluctantly agreed to pass his message to the triplets. He wasn't sure they would come. The bell above the door jingled. 3 young men entered, moving with the synchronicity only siblings who had grown up together could achieve. Wesley's heart hammered against his ribs as he stood to greet them. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Ethan, the most confrontational of the 3, stood with arms crossed, his posture rigid with hostility. "We're here because Mom would have wanted us to hear you out." "That's it." And Noah, analytical and measured, pulled out a chair. "Let's sit. No need to make a scene." Camden, the sensitive one, said nothing but studied Wesley's face with the same intensity he'd shown at the cemetery. Once seated, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Wesley, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and negotiating billion-dollar deals, found himself at a loss for words. "I read your mother's letter," he finally began, "and I visited the school. What she built, it's extraordinary." "Why now?" Ethan's question cut like a knife. "It's been 20 years. Why show up now that she's gone?" Wesley met his son's gaze directly. "Because I didn't know. About you 3. About what she built. I made a terrible mistake 20 years ago. Judging your mother for things that didn't matter." "Didn't matter?" Ethan's voice rose slightly. "Her background, her family's finances, those were exactly the things that mattered to you. Enough to throw her out without a second thought." Camden placed a calming hand on his brother's arm. "Let him speak, Eth." Wesley nodded gratefully to Camden. "You're right, Ethan. I was shallow and prideful. I cared more about appearance than substance. It's taken me 20 years and losing everything that actually mattered to realize that." Noah leaned forward, ever the pragmatist. "What exactly do you want from us, Mr. Thornton?" The formal address stung, but Wesley accepted it as deserved. "A chance. Not forgiveness, I haven't earned that. Just an opportunity to know you, to support what your mother created." "We don't need your money," Ethan snapped. "I'm not offering money," Wesley replied quietly. "I'm offering myself, my time, whatever skills I have that might be useful." Camden spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his brother's. "Mom always said you were good at building things." A fragile tendril of hope unfurled in Wesley's chest. "Yes, I can build things." Noah studied him carefully. "The school needs repairs. The roof leaks in 3 places. The electrical system is outdated." Wesley nodded eagerly. "I could help with that. Contractors, materials." "No," Ethan interrupted. "If you want to help, you do it yourself. No throwing money around. No hiring people to do the work for you." The challenge was clear. Wesley hesitated only a moment before accepting. "When can I start?" The brothers exchanged looks, having one of those silent conversations only siblings could. Monday, 7 a.m. "Noah," finally said. "Bring work clothes. Nothing fancy. As they stood to leave, Camden hesitated, then placed a small photograph on the table. This was Mom's favorite picture of us. 3 10-year-old boys grinned from the image, arms around each, others' shoulders standing in front of their school. "Thank you," Wesley whispered, but they were already walking away. The Thornton Group's boardroom hummed with tension when Wesley entered. Board members sat rigid in their leather chairs, already unsettled by the unusual timing of the meeting he'd called. Wesley had always been predictable, methodical. Emergency meetings weren't his style. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, remaining standing rather than taking his usual seat at the head of the table. "I'll be brief. As of today, I'm stepping down as CEO of the Thornton Group." The reaction was immediate. Charles Whitman, his longest-serving board member, nearly knocked over his water glass. "Wesley, you can't be serious. The company's stock will plummet. The quarterly projections—" Another board member started. Wesley held up his hand. "I've already instructed my legal team to begin the process. This isn't a discussion. It's a notification." "At least tell us why," demanded Patricia Chen, head of international operations. "We deserve that much." Wesley pulled Charlotte's letter from his pocket. Though he didn't unfold it, just touching it gave him strength. "Because I've spent 30 years building something that doesn't matter." He clicked a remote, and images of the Beacon of Hope School appeared on the boardroom screens. Children reading in the garden, volunteers painting murals, community members teaching classes. "This is the Beacon of Hope School," Wesley explained, his voice steady with newfound conviction. "Founded by Charlotte Thornton with nothing but determination and a clear purpose. I'm selling my controlling interest in the Thornton Group and establishing the Charlotte Thornton Foundation. We'll replicate this model across the country. Schools that serve communities, that teach more than just facts and figures." The boardroom erupted in protests. His lawyers, seated in the corner, exchanged worried glances. "Mr. Thornton," his head counsel interrupted, "I must advise against this. The media will tear you apart. Business titan abandons empire for failed. Marriage's pet project." "Your reputation—" "That's the point," Wesley said quietly but with enough force to silence the room. "My reputation was built on the wrong things. I'm not asking for your approval or your understanding. I'm telling you what will happen, and I'm giving you the courtesy of hearing it first." He placed a thick folder on the table. "Inside, you'll find my formal resignation, along with details of the transition plan. The company will survive. It might even become something better." Without waiting for more protests, Wesley walked out of the boardroom he'd spent decades commanding. He'd never felt as powerful as he did walking away. In his office, he gathered only what truly mattered, a small box of photographs and mementos he'd rediscovered while searching his apartment. Everything else, the awards, the press clippings, the framed magazine covers, he left behind. His assistant Linda stood by his door, confusion written across her face. "Mr. Thornton, is this really happening? The press is already calling. What should I tell them?" Wesley smiled genuinely. "Tell them Wesley Thornton is finally building something worthwhile." As the elevator doors closed on his old life, Wesley felt a weight lifting. For the first time in decades, he was moving towards something real, not just accumulating more hollow success. He checked his watch. 6:30 p.m. Just enough time to buy work clothes for tomorrow. Proper boots, sturdy jeans, shirts that could get dirty. Wesley Thornton, billionaire developer, was about to become Wesley, the maintenance man at a community school. And strangely, he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this alive. The dew still clung to the grass when Wesley approached the Beacon of Hope School at 6:45 a.m. Monday morning. He wore brand new jeans, work boots that hadn't yet lost their shine, and a simple button-down shirt, the most casual clothes he'd purchased in decades. In his hands, he carried a small toolbox he'd bought the night before, filled with basic tools whose names he'd had to look up online. The crisp morning air carried the scent of fresh coffee and baking bread from a nearby cafe, but Wesley's stomach was too knotted with nervousness to feel hunger. The side door opened before he could knock. Noah stood there, regarding Wesley with an appraising look. His middle, Son wore worn jeans and a faded school t-shirt, his expression carefully neutral. "You're early," Noah observed. "I didn't want to be late," Wesley replied simply. Noah nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "The maintenance room is this way." They walked through quiet hallways, Noah pointing out classrooms, storage areas, and community spaces. Wesley listened intently, committing the layout to memory. This was Charlotte's world, the legacy she'd built while he'd been constructing skyscrapers and chasing wealth. "Here," Noah said, opening a door to a cluttered storage room filled with cleaning supplies, tools, and replacement parts. "Margaret will be in at 8 to give you a list of what needs fixing. Until then, you can organize this mess if you want." Left alone, Wesley stared at the chaos before him. In his corporate life, everything had been organized by assistants, cleaned by housekeepers, maintained by staff. Now he was the staff. He rolled up his sleeves and began sorting through decades of accumulated supplies, separating broken tools from usable ones, arranging cleaning products by type, discovering half-empty paint cans in colors that matched the school's cheerful walls. He was so absorbed in the task that he didn't notice someone watching until a throat cleared behind him. Camden stood in the doorway holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering one to Wesley. "Thank you," Wesley said, genuinely touched by the small gesture. Camden nodded, glancing around at Wesley's organizing progress. "You take it black, right?" Wesley couldn't hide his surprise. "How did you know?" A hint of a smile crossed Camden's face. "Mom mentioned it once, said you treated coffee like a business meeting. No room for cream or sugar to soften things." The casual mention of Charlotte, of something she'd remembered about him all these years, hit Wesley with unexpected force. He took a sip to hide his emotion. Camden hesitated, then added, "The 3rd grade classroom has desks with wobbly legs. Kids keep getting pinched fingers. Might want to start there." By midday, Wesley had fixed 6 desks, unclogged 2 sinks, and replaced a broken window latch. His hands were already developing blisters, his back ached from crouching, and his new boots had rubbed a painful spot on his heel. He'd never felt more purposeful in his life. Children peered curiously at him as they passed in the hallways. Teachers nodded politely but kept their distance, clearly aware of who he was but unsure how to interact with their founder's ex-husband, now working as their handyman. At lunchtime, Wesley sat alone on a bench in the courtyard, eating a sandwich he'd packed. He watched the children play, searching their faces for glimpses of his sons at the same age. "That's my spot." Wesley looked up to find Ethan standing over him, arms crossed. Unlike his brother's cautious neutrality, Ethan made no attempt to hide his resentment. "I'm sorry," Wesley said, starting to stand. "I'll move." "Just remember this isn't some game," Ethan said, his voice low. "You don't get to waltz in here, play handyman for a few days, then go back to your penthouse feeling better about yourself." Their eyes met, identical shades of gray, equally stubborn. "I'm not playing," Wesley said quietly. "I'm trying to build something." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We'll see." He turned and walked away, leaving Wesley alone with his sandwich and the growing understanding that redemption would come neither quickly nor easily. Days blended into weeks as Wesley established a new routine at Beacon of Hope. He arrived before sunrise each morning, swept the walkways clear of leaves and debris, then methodically worked through Margaret's growing list of repairs. His body, once pampered with personal trainers and luxury spas, now ached in new ways. Muscles, strained from carrying lumber, fingers scraped from fixing broken chairs, back sore from unclogging gutters, yet the physical discomfort felt right somehow, as if he were finally earning his place in the world through genuine effort rather than inherited privilege. The children adjusted to his presence faster than the adults. To them, he was simply Mr. Wesley, the quiet man who fixed things. They approached him with simple requests: a stuck locker, a wobbly table, a ball trapped on the roof, and he responded with a patience he hadn't known he possessed. "Mr. Wesley, can you help me reach that book?" A small girl named Lily asked one afternoon, pointing to a high shelf in the library. Wesley set down his tools and knelt beside her. "Let's see if we can figure this out together," he said, showing her how to use the library stool safely instead of just getting the book for her. Lily beamed when she retrieved the book herself. "I did it. Thank you." These small interactions, so insignificant compared to the billion-dollar deals he once negotiated, somehow felt infinitely more meaningful. His son's reactions to his presence varied dramatically. Ethan maintained his distance, watching critically, from afar, his disapproval evident in every glance. Noah was professionally cordial, acknowledging Wesley's work with brief nods when they passed in hallways. Only Camden showed signs of thawing. He began bringing Wesley coffee each morning, lingering slightly longer each time, eventually sharing small stories about the school and the music program he taught. "Mom used to say that music reaches places words can't," Camden mentioned one morning. "That's why she insisted on having instruments even when we could barely afford textbooks." These glimpses into Charlotte's philosophy, her priorities, her wisdom, they were precious gifts that Wesley collected carefully, piecing together the woman she'd become in his absence. One rainy afternoon, Wesley was repairing a leak in the TU's art room ceiling when he heard piano music drifting from the music room. Following the sound, he found Camden alone at the piano, playing something hauntingly beautiful. Wesley stood silently in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. When the piece ended, Camden spoke without turning around. "That was Mom's favorite, Debussy. She used to sit right where you're standing when I practiced." Wesley's throat tightened. "It's beautiful." Camden looked up, his expression unreadable. "She taught me to play, you know. Saved for 3 years to buy that piano from a church that was closing. Worked night shifts at the hospital to pay for my lessons." The weight of all Charlotte had done alone pressed down on Wesley. She was remarkable. "Yes," Camden agreed. After a pause, he added, "The roof over the west hallway is worse than we thought. Noah's worried about structural damage." Wesley recognized the olive branch disguised as a practical concern. "I'll take a look tomorrow. I might know someone who could help." He stopped himself, remembering Ethan's warning about throwing money at problems. Camden seemed to read his thoughts. "It's okay to use your connections, you know. Not everything has to be done with your own hands, just be here for it. Be part of it. That's what matters." That night, Wesley returned to his rented apartment, a modest 2-bedroom he'd taken near the school, leaving his penthouse behind. He sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by building plans, contractor quotes, and material lists, planning repairs for the school that would last. For the first time in decades, he was building something not to impress others or to expand his wealth, but simply because people he cared about needed it to stand strong. While Wesley worked steadily at the school each day, he spent his evenings quietly laying groundwork for something larger. In a small notebook, so different from the leather-bound planners of his corporate days, he sketched ideas for the Charlotte Thornton Foundation. The vision was clear: expand the Beacon of Hope model to other communities, providing education where it was most needed. Not with imposing buildings bearing the Thornton name, but with thoughtful spaces that embodied Charlotte's philosophy, that every child deserved a chance regardless of background. He'd been at the school for 2 months when a fierce storm hit the city. Wesley arrived before dawn to find significant damage: branches through windows, roof sections peeled back, and the west hallway flooding badly. Noah was already there, moving books and materials away from the water. "The structural damage is worse than I feared," he said when he spotted Wesley. "We can't afford this kind of repair." Instead of offering money immediately, Wesley asked, "Do you have the original building plans? I'd like to take a look." Together, they assessed the damage, Wesley applying decades of construction knowledge not as the billionaire developer, but as someone who genuinely cared about fixing what was broken. "The foundation is still solid," Wesley observed, "but the roof system was poorly designed from the beginning. We shouldn't just patch it, we should rebuild it properly." Noah raised an eyebrow. "That's a much bigger project than replacing a few shingles. It would last longer, be safer." Wesley hesitated, then added, "I've been working on something, a foundation in your mother's name. This could be its first project. Noah's expression remained guarded. Ethan won't like it. I'm not asking to slap my name on the building or take control, Wesley explained carefully. I'm offering resources to honor Charlotte's work properly, to make it stronger. Later that day, Wesley presented his proposal to all three brothers in Charlotte's old office. He'd prepared meticulously, bringing building plans, cost estimates, and a clear structure for the foundation that gave the brothers full control. Ethan's initial reaction was predictably hostile. So you finally got tired of playing janitor and decided to buy your way in? Ethan, Camden admonished softly. Wesley met his eldest son's gaze directly. I'm not trying to buy anything. I'm trying to build something lasting just like your mother did. With your money, Ethan challenged. Yes, Wesley acknowledged. With money that would otherwise sit in accounts doing nothing worthwhile. Money that could instead continue your mother's vision. Noah, ever practical, studied the plans. The structural improvements make sense, and having funds for scholarships would help dozens of families. What's the catch? Ethan demanded. What do you get out of this? Wesley considered his answer, carefully. A chance to be part of something that matters, to help continue what Charlotte started. Camden, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Mom always said there were many ways to build things. Some people use their hands, some use their minds, some use their resources. He looked at Wesley. She never would have turned down help that would benefit the children, no matter where it came from. The brothers exchanged looks, having one of those silent conversations that excluded Wesley. Finally, Noah nodded. We'll consider the proposal, but with conditions. The foundation's board must include staff and parents from the school. All decisions must be transparent. And you... He looked pointedly at Wesley. We'll continue working here, physically present, not just writing checks. Agreed, Wesley said immediately. As they left, Camden lingered. You know, she kept a file about you. Newspaper clippings, articles about your buildings. His voice softened. She always told us you knew how to build things that last. For Wesley, those words were worth more than all the wealth he'd accumulated over a lifetime. The autumn evening wrapped the beacon of hope in a gentle blanket of twilight. Inside the main hall, fairy lights twinkled like captured stars strung across wooden beams and around window frames. The annual storytelling night, a cherished tradition Charlotte had started years ago, filled the space with warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Parents sat in mismatched chairs, their faces glowing with pride and anticipation. Children fidgeted on colorful cushions spread across the floor, their excitement barely contained. The air hummed with whispered conversations and muffled giggles. Wesley stood at the back of the room, partially hidden by a tall bookshelf. His maintenance uniform blended into the shadows, making him nearly invisible to the crowd. He'd spent the afternoon preparing the space, arranging chairs, hanging lights, making sure everything was perfect. Now he watched silently as the community Charlotte had built came together in celebration. The evening began with Margaret introducing the event. Welcome to our annual storytelling night, she announced, her voice warm and inviting. This tradition started when Charlotte noticed how stories could give children wings to fly and roots to grow. One by one, children made their way to the front. A small boy with glasses told a tale about a brave mouse who saved his village from flooding. A girl with braids shared an adventure about a magical umbrella that granted wishes. Each story brought fresh waves of laughter and applause. Wesley watched it all, his heart full. He recognized these children now knew their habits, their struggles, their small victories. He'd cleaned up their spilled juice, fixed their broken pencil sharpeners, listened to their whispered secrets during lunch breaks. Yet he remained in the background, content to be part of their world without drawing attention to himself. Then a little girl named Lily, the same one he'd helped reach a book, raised her hand eagerly. Her voice carried across the room. Can Mr. Wesley tell one? The room fell silent. Heads turned, searching for him in the shadows. Wesley felt his throat tighten as dozens of eyes found him. He hadn't prepared for this moment. His instinct was to decline, to retreat back into his comfortable invisibility. But then he caught Camden's gaze from across the room. His youngest son gave him a subtle nod, encouragement shining in his eyes. It was the same look Charlotte used to give him decades ago when she believed in him more than he believed in himself. Taking a deep breath, Wesley stepped forward. The fairy lights cast soft shadows across his face as he made his way through the crowd. Children shifted on their cushions, making space for him. He knelt down at the front of the room, bringing himself to their eye level. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant, like the pause before opening a gift. The children leaned forward slightly, their faces open and curious. Wesley cleared his throat softly and began. Once a man threw away the only light he had. His voice, usually quiet and reserved, carried clearly through the hushed room. And spent 20 years walking in the dark. The children sat perfectly still, caught in the simple truth of his words. Parents listened too, some beginning to understand the deeper meaning behind his tale. Then one day, Wesley continued, his voice growing warmer, he followed laughter and found 3 young men who carried that light. His eyes flickered briefly to where his son stood, though he didn't look directly at them. And for the first time he asked if he could walk with them. The last words hung in the air like the fairy lights above, delicate, illuminating, full of quiet beauty. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a small child near the front began to clap. Another joined in. The sound spread like ripples in a pond until the whole hall erupted in applause. Through the blur of clapping hands and smiling faces, Wesley noticed movement at the back of the room. Ethan stood there, arms crossed over his chest. For a moment, he remained still, like a statue caught between motion and rest. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded once. The smallest acknowledgement, but enough to make Wesley's heart soar. The early morning mist clung to the school grounds as Wesley tended the small garden behind the building. 6 months had passed since he'd first arrived, and the garden had become his special project. A space where children could learn about growing things, patience, and care. His hands, once soft from a lifetime of luxury, were now calloused and strong, comfortable with earth and tools. He'd just finished watering the row of sunflowers when he heard footsteps approaching. Camden arrived most mornings before classes to practice piano. But today it was Ethan who stood at the garden's edge, watching Wesley work. For several minutes, neither spoke. Wesley continued pruning the tomato plants, giving his eldest son space to break the silence when ready. "My mother planted sunflowers every year," Ethan finally said. "No matter how tight money was, she always found seeds somewhere." Wesley nodded, remembering. She loved how they turned to face the sun. Said people could learn from that, how to seek out light. Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised by this shared memory. "She told you that too?" "A lifetime ago," Wesley replied softly, "before I forgot what mattered." Another silence fell between them, less tense than before. Ethan stepped into the garden, examining the neat rows of vegetables and herbs. "The foundation board approved the expansion plans yesterday," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "The Riverside neighborhood site. Construction starts next month." Wesley kept his expression measured, though his heart leaped at the news. The Charlotte Thornton Foundation's first new school, a milestone he'd dreamed of but hadn't dared hope would come so soon. "That's excellent news," he said simply. "It's a neighborhood that needs it. Noah wants you at the planning meeting tomorrow. Says your construction experience would be useful." Ethan's words came reluctantly, but they were offered nonetheless. "I'd be honored," Wesley said, meaning it. Ethan nodded stiffly, then hesitated, before adding, "I found something yesterday, cleaning out some of Mom's old files." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping. Wesley recognized it immediately, the front page of the business journal from 15 years ago, featuring the completion of Thornton Tower. In the photo, Wesley stood proudly before the gleaming skyscraper, cutting a ribbon at the grand opening. "She kept this?" Wesley asked, voice barely above a whisper. She kept all of them, Ethan replied. Every article, every mention of your projects. She had a whole folder. Wesley stared at the clipping, his vision blurring slightly. I don't understand. Why would she? Camden thinks she was proud of you in her way, Ethan said, the admission clearly difficult for him. That even though you weren't part of our lives, she wanted us to know our father built things that lasted. The irony wasn't lost on Wesley, that Charlotte had respected his work while he'd been blind to the far more meaningful structure she was building. She was wrong about one thing, Wesley said quietly, looking up at the school building illuminated by the rising sun. This is what will last, not my towers. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. He gestured toward a stack of lumber near the garden shed. The kids need new benches for the outdoor classroom, he said. I'm building them Saturday morning, could use an extra pair of hands. It wasn't an embrace or even a friendly invitation, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall Ethan had maintained since their first meeting. I'll be here, Wesley promised. As Ethan turned to leave, Wesley called after him. Thank you for showing me this. He held up the clipping. And for giving me a chance to help build something that matters. Ethan paused, but didn't turn around. Saturday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Then he walked away, his shoulders slightly less rigid than before. Wesley carefully folded the newspaper clipping and placed it in his pocket close to his heart. In the eastern sky, the sun broke fully above the horizon, painting the world in shades of possibility. The grand opening of the Riverside Beacon of Hope School brought together the entire community on a bright spring morning. A modest ribbon stretched across the entrance of the renovated community center that would now serve as an educational haven for one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. Wesley stood in the background, watching with quiet pride as his three sons addressed the gathered crowd. Noah, articulate and precise, explained the educational philosophy that would guide the new school. Camden, with natural warmth, introduced the arts program he had designed, and Ethan, typically reserved with strangers, spoke passionately about the vocational training that would help parents as well as children. Not once did any of them mention that the funding had come from Wesley Thornton. The Charlotte Thornton Foundation was the official sponsor, with the brothers as its public face. Wesley had insisted on this arrangement, understanding that this moment belonged to Charlotte's legacy, not his redemption story. They're quite remarkable, aren't they? Margaret appeared beside Wesley, her eyes shining with pride. Charlotte would be bursting right now. Wesley nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. These accomplished young men, so confident and purposeful, they had grown into their greatness without his guidance. Charlotte had done that alone. After the ceremony, as families explored the new facilities, Wesley found himself approached by an elderly man with weathered hands and keen eyes. You're their father, he stated simply. Charlotte's husband. I was, Wesley acknowledged, extending his hand. Wesley Thornton. James Roberts. I was Charlotte's neighbor when the boys were little. The man's handshake was firm despite his age. Used to watch them sometimes when she worked night shifts. Wesley felt the familiar pang of absence, another piece of his son's childhood he had missed. Thank you for helping her. I understand. She had very little support. James studied him thoughtfully. She never complained, you know. Not once in all those years, even when she was working 3 jobs and those boys had chicken pox all at the same time. He chuckled at the memory. She just kept going, building her dream one brick at a time. I wish I had known, Wesley said quietly. I wish I had been there. Well, you're here now, James observed. That's something. Across the room, Wesley spotted Camden waving him over to where the 3 brothers stood with a group of community leaders. This was new, being publicly acknowledged, included in their professional circle. Excuse me, Wesley said to James, who nodded with understanding. As Wesley approached, he heard Ethan describing the custom bookshelves they had built together for the new library. My father's design actually improved the structural support, Ethan said, using the word father for the first time in Wesley's presence. The simple acknowledgement meant more than any skyscraper Wesley had ever built. Later that evening, the four men gathered at Camden's apartment for a quiet celebration. Wesley had been to his youngest son's home several times now, each visit feeling more natural than the last. The wall of family photographs no longer caused him pain. Instead, he appreciated these glimpses into the years he had missed, grateful that Charlotte had documented them so lovingly. Noah raised his glass. To Mom, he said, who taught us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. To Mom, Ethan and Camden echoed. Wesley raised his glass as well. To Charlotte, he said softly, who built something truly lasting. As the evening progressed, Wesley found himself sitting beside Ethan on the balcony while Noah and Camden argued good-naturedly about music in the kitchen. The foundation received 3 more requests this week, Ethan said, looking out at the city lights. Communities asking if we'd consider their neighborhoods for the next school. Wesley nodded. That's wonderful. We'll need to expand the board, Ethan continued. Someone with experience managing growth, overseeing multiple projects simultaneously. The implied invitation hung in the air between them. Wesley let it rest there, not grabbing for it, understanding that some bridges needed to be built slowly, carefully. I might know someone, Wesley said simply. Ethan's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. I thought you might. 7 years passed like leaves turning in autumn, gradual yet transformative. The beacon of hope had grown from Charlotte's modest dream into a thriving network of community schools, its model replicated in 12 neighborhoods, across the city and spreading to neighboring communities. Wesley, now 65, moved more slowly through the hallways of the original school where he still served as head of maintenance. His hair had turned completely silver, and reading glasses now, perched on his nose, but his commitment never wavered. Each morning before sunrise, he still arrived with his familiar toolbox, ensuring everything was perfect for the children's arrival. The Charlotte Thornton Foundation had become his life's focus, though he remained largely behind the scenes. The brothers were its public face, respected educational innovators whose approach was drawing national attention. Wesley's role was advisory and supportive, offering his business expertise while learning from his son's vision and compassion. A crisp fall morning, Wesley carefully hung a new sign outside the original school's entrance. The building had undergone extensive renovations over the years, new classrooms, updated technology, expanded facilities, but its heart remained unchanged. It looks perfect, came Noah's voice behind him. Wesley turned to see his middle son, now a confident 27-year-old with Charlotte's gentle eyes and his own determined jaw. Noah had earned his law degree and now served as the foundation's legal director, protecting their mission with the same thoroughness he applied to everything. Your mother would be proud, Wesley said, stepping back to admire the sign that read, Charlotte Thornton Main Campus, where every light finds its way. Noah nodded. She'd be proud of you too, you know. Such moments still caught Wesley by surprise, these glimpses of acceptance, of family connection that had once seemed impossible. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks, arguments, painful conversations where old wounds reopened. But slowly, deliberately, they had built something together. Later that day, the family gathered in the school's common area for a small celebration. Camden, who now directed music programs across all the foundation schools, played the piano that Charlotte had saved years to buy. His gentle melodies filled the space as staff, students, and community members mingled. Ethan approached Wesley with a cup of coffee. Black, just as he liked it. Their relationship had evolved the most dramatically over the years, from open hostility to grudging respect to something approaching friendship. 27 years ago today, Ethan said quietly. Wesley nodded, understanding immediately. The day I asked her to leave. The day she chose to protect us all, Ethan corrected gently. Even you. Wesley looked around the room, at the thriving community Charlotte had envisioned, at the 3 remarkable men she had raised. at the legacy that had grown beyond anything they could have imagined. "I think about how differently things might have gone," Wesley admitted, "if I'd been less proud, less concerned with appearances." Ethan considered this. Maybe, or maybe this is exactly how it needed to happen. He gestured around them. Would all of this exist if your lives had taken a different path? It was a question Wesley often pondered, whether the pain and separation had somehow been necessary for this greater good to emerge. He had no answer, only gratitude for the second chance he'd been given. Across the room, a young mother approached, with her daughter in tow. "Mr. Thornton, my Sophia has something she'd like to give you." The little girl, no more than 6, shyly held out a crayon drawing. "Thank you for fixing my desk," she whispered. Wesley knelt to accept her artwork, a colorful rendering of the school with 4 stick figures standing beside it. "The Thornton boys," she explained, pointing to each one in turn. "That's Mr. Ethan, Mr. Noah, Mr. Camden, and that's you, Mr. Wesley. 4 figures standing together, a family, reunited after all." "Thank you, Sophia," Wesley said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll treasure this." As the child skipped away, Ethan placed a hand briefly on Wesley's shoulder, a small gesture that would have been unthinkable years ago. "The Thornton boys," he repeated with a hint of a smile. "Mom would like that." The morning dew still clung to the grass when Ethan arrived at the original Beacon of Hope School. At 32, he had grown into a man of quiet strength, his carpentry skills now legendary among the students and staff. The workshop he'd built with his own hands had become a sanctuary where troubled teens found purpose and direction through creating beautiful things with their hands. His routine rarely varied, arriving early to prepare materials for his woodworking classes, checking in with the maintenance staff, then meeting his brothers for their weekly planning session. But today, something felt different. Wesley hadn't arrived. For 8 years, Ethan's father had maintained an unwavering routine, always the first to arrive, always ensuring everything was perfect before students appeared. His absence now was jarring, like a familiar painting suddenly tilted. "Have you seen Dad?" he asked Margaret, who after all these years still served as the school's heart. She shook her head, concerned. "He was supposed to fix the library shelves this morning. It's not like him to be late." Ethan tried calling, but there was no answer. A faint worry began to grow as Noah and Camden arrived for their meeting. "Maybe he's finally taking a day off," Noah suggested, though his tone revealed his doubt. Camden shook his head. "He wouldn't, not without telling us. I'll drive to his place." The small house Wesley rented just 3 blocks from the school had become a familiar sight over the years. Modest but well-maintained, with a small garden that mirrored the one at the Beacon. Camden found the front door unlocked, something unusual for his father. Inside, morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting gentle shadows across the living room. Wesley sat in his favorite chair, hands folded peacefully in his lap, as if he had simply decided to rest for a moment. But the stillness was different this time. Final. Complete. On the small table beside him lay an open photo album, the same one he had found in his penthouse 8 years ago. The page showed Charlotte's smiling face, and beside it a recent photo of the 3 brothers at the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. Wesley Thornton had died as he had lived these last years, surrounded by memories of love rather than symbols of wealth. The news spread through the Beacon community with quiet reverence. Children left drawings on his regular maintenance cart. Teachers shared stories of his small kindnesses, the broken heater he fixed without being asked, the extra time he spent helping set up for special events, the way he remembered every child's name. The funeral was simple but profound. Representatives from all 12 Beacon schools filled the community hall where Wesley had told his first story years ago. The 3 brothers stood together greeting mourners, united in their grief but also in their gratitude for the years they'd had with their father. "He changed everything," Camden said during his eulogy, his voice steady despite his tears. "Not with grand gestures or public statements, but through consistent, humble presence. through showing up day after day and giving the best of himself to our mother's dream. Noah spoke of Wesley's business acumen, how he had transformed his understanding of success to ensure the foundation's stability for generations to come. Ethan, who had once been the most resistant to Wesley's presence, delivered the final tribute. "My father built skyscrapers before he knew us," he said, looking out at the gathered community. "But his greatest achievement was learning to build bridges between the past and present, between wealth and purpose, between strangers who became family." In the days that followed, the brothers found themselves going through Wesley's modest belongings. There were no expensive watches or designer suits left from his previous life. Instead, they found carefully organized tools, albums filled with school photographs, and journals documenting repairs and improvements he'd planned for each beacon facility. In his desk drawer, they discovered an envelope addressed to them in Wesley's neat handwriting. "My sons," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I've finally run out of things to fix. Know that these years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Not a gift I deserved, but one I treasured every day. Charlotte built something extraordinary in you and in the beacon. I was privileged to witness it, even late. I've left detailed plans for improvements to all 12 schools. Noah will find the funding arrangements in order. Nothing extravagant. Your mother taught me that it's not about impressive facades, but about creating spaces where light can enter. Ethan, in my workshop you'll find 3 handcrafted boxes I've been working on in secret. One for each of you, containing mementos I collected over these years together. The craftsmanship isn't perfect. I learned from watching you, but they were made with love. Camden, the old piano in the main hall needs replacing. I've arranged for a new one, worthy of your talent and your mother's vision for how music heals. My greatest regret remains the 20 years I lost with you. And with Charlotte. My greatest joy was finding my way back to what truly matters. Continue building on your mother's foundation. Light always guides, even in darkness. With love and gratitude, your father." Weeks later, on a crisp morning that reminded everyone of new beginnings, a simple wooden bench appeared under the old oak tree near Charlotte's grave. Ethan had made it himself, each piece carefully selected and shaped with the skills his father had quietly admired. The words carved into its back were few but powerful. Charlotte and Wesley Thornton. Love builds what pride cannot. Below that, a smaller line read, "Father, builder, man who tried again." The bench faced toward the Beacon of Hope School, offering a perfect view of the playground where children's laughter filled the air. Lanterns hung from tree branches, swaying gently in the breeze. A tradition Charlotte had started and Wesley had carefully maintained. Ethan, Noah, and Camden sat together on the bench, their shoulders touching lightly. The afternoon sun painted everything in warm golden tones, and the sound of playing children drifted across the yard. "Do you think they're together now?" Camden asked softly. Noah nodded. "I like to think so. 28 years apart was enough." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, one of many Wesley had collected from the school garden over the years. He placed it carefully atop Charlotte's headstone, beside the fresh flowers they had brought. He found his way back. Ethan said simply, "That's what matters." Before them, a child ran past, her voice bright and eager. "Mr. Thornton, story time." The 3 brothers smiled at each other, recognizing their shared legacy, not in buildings or wealth, but in the stories they would continue to tell, the lives they would touch, and the light they would keep shining forward. In that quiet moment, between past and future, they could almost feel their parents' presence, Charlotte's vision and Wesley's redemption intertwined at last in the legacy they had built together.